Morning, Calvary. We have already begun the book of Exodus. That was this last Lord's Day. We sat down and we did an overview of the entire book, and now we are in our daily and our weekly reading, and we're supposed to get through chapter 12 this week. My wife and I started reading, we got as far as chapter 5 this morning, and we came across something that caused a little bit of discussion, and I wanted to take a minute and share that with you guys. So we're in Exodus chapter 4. The burning bush has already taken place. God has already called Moses to leave Midian, go back to Egypt, and confront Pharaoh and ask him to let his people go. And on the way, we get in chapter 4, starting in verse 24. I just want to go ahead and read it with you guys, and we can kind of discuss what is going on in these verses. In chapter 24, we read, "Now it came about at the lodging place on the way that the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and threw it at Moses' feet and said, 'You are indeed a bridegroom of blood to me.' So he let him alone. At that time she said, 'You are a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision.'" Now this kind of conjures up maybe a negative aspect of Zipporah, that she is doing this act out of anger at Moses. And I just want to hopefully bring a little bit of light to this. Now, the interesting thing is that when we are reading this in the original, Moses is nowhere in this text. I know most of our modern translations kind of insert Moses in here because the text is kind of ambiguous. It just keeps using these third-person pronouns, him, his, but it never really tells us who. I think that's actually on purpose. The reader is supposed to be reading through this and kind of go, what? What's going on? The Bible does that at times to make us slow down and think about what we just read. And I'm going to argue that Moses is nowhere in this text. So what's going on? Now it came about at the lodging place on the way that the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Who is the him? Who is the Lord seeking to put to death? Well, the only male mentioned in this text is the son of Zipporah, probably Gershom, whom we will already been introduced to as the son of Moses. Like we said, his name is absent from these verses. So the Lord is going to seek to put him to death. Why? Well, because he is not circumcised. Back in Genesis 17, remember that's why we're reading this in order. Back in Genesis 17, the sign of circumcision is the sign of God's covenant people. Anyone failing to circumcise their son, that person, anyone who is not circumcised, not sealed with the sign of the covenant, will be cut off from his people. Now Moses is coming to lead Israel out. He is going to be the tool that God uses to forge this ragtag bunch of slaves into a nation, not just a nation, but a nation of his own choosing. A nation of priests that are going to stand before the Lord and display and declare his glory to the world. How would that look if the prophet's own son was not sealed with that sign of the covenant? And so God meets him there. It says the Lord, all caps. Remember what that means. Yahweh meets them on the way and is going to put him to death. Another thing we get is this kind of an angry response on the part of Zipporah. Absolutely not. I think I'm reading out of the New American Standard, and I think that it takes a lot of liberties here, and I think incorrectly so. It says that she took a flint, cut off her son's foreskin, and threw it at Moses' feet. Remember, Moses is absent from the original. It just says his feet. And the word throw, it's not in the text at all. She took a flint because in the Bronze Age. You can get a flint knife a lot sharper than you could a bronze instrument. So this is really just doing the right thing here. She took a flint knife, the sharpest implement she could get her hands on. She circumcised him, and then she touched his feet. This is really a symbolic sign. She removes the foreskin and then touches him and says, "You are a kinsman of blood." I think, again, that's a little strange translation there. Bridegroom of blood. You are a kinsman. You are now part of the covenant community through blood. We have now been obedient to God's call upon us. This is actually a very responsible, very insightful, and very obedient response on the part of Zipporah. She's not doing this out of anger, out of spite, or out of desperation. She knows exactly what's at stake. She knows what needs to be done. And now that it is done, not only does God stay his hand, but her son is now a part of the covenant community. Hopefully, that clears up some things. That might draw more questions than it answers. And for that, we have our small groups meeting this next Lord's Day. I hope this was helpful. I hope that it helped you understand this particular text as you're reading through. Looking forward to sitting down and discussing it with you.